caught up in all the hype. And if Tupac came back from the dead now to hear this interview, he would agree.
And Pac went in the studio and did a song together. And then them little dudes.
Outlaws.
Yeah.
Outlaws.
They came, like, as soon as we got there, they came up to Pac talking about, yo, Lauryn Hill dissed you, Mobb Deep dissed you, this and that, and so then Pac went in the studio and started writing about, I think it might have been that. Yeah,
KRS-One is finally clearing the air about Big Daddy Kane and Tupac's bond, and what he revealed will shock you. A lot of the so-called facts people spread about them are straight up wrong. According to KRS-One, Kane and Tupac were never enemies. In reality, they had nothing but respect for each other. So why did it always seem like the game wanted them clashing? Look no further than Suge Knight. Suge was known for stirring the pot, pushing his own narratives, and forcing artists to pick sides. That East Coast versus West Coast tension wasn't just beef. It was a money machine that sold records, sold magazines, and kept the cameras flashing. But Big Daddy Kane wanted no part in that messy game.
Pac is a lyricist. See what I'm saying? It's just that he's not one of those lyrical MCs that spit stuff, but his stuff is, he spit deep lyrics.
Tupac, on the other hand, got pulled into it whether he wanted to or not. KRS-One made it clear, if there was ever tension between Kane and Pac, it was all smoke and mirrors. Pure manipulation, not real beef. Kane was even approached by Death Row to sign on, but he turned it down. And just that decision alone dragged him into a storyline he never asked for. Behind the scenes, there was nothing but mutual respect between Kane and Pac. They even shared unreleased talks and collabs that the public never got to hear. Now it's time to pull back the curtain and break down what really went down between these two legends. Back in the mid-90s, Suge Knight was busy expanding his empire with the launch of Death Row East. It was a bold play to lock down the East Coast market, and who better to front that move than one of Brooklyn's sharpest lyricists, Big Daddy Kane. Kane himself confirmed in interviews that Suge's team came at him with a $100,000 advance and a deal that could have flipped his career upside down. But Kane wasn't interested in being another pawn in the industry's game. Kane shut it down quick, saying he wasn't about to get caught up in that scene. That choice instantly marked him as a neutral player in the rising East Coast versus West Coast war. Kane could feel something wasn't right. Nobody drops that kind of money without strings attached. He knew he was staring the devil in the face, and he refused to sell out. But this wasn't just about Kane. His rejection of Death Row East was also him refusing to be pulled into a fake rivalry with Tupac. Even with Suge scheming to pit them against each other, Kane and Pac had a surprisingly real respect. Their bond was built on respect. KRS-One has said it time and time again. Kane never had beef with Tupac. In fact, he claimed Kane and Pac shared more common ground than most rappers in the game. Sadly, though, Pac got sucked into the chaos of that East Coast versus West Coast storm.
Signed you to Death Row East at one point?
Yeah.
What happened with that?
He called and said, Suge trying to, build a Death Row East, man, I think it might be a good look for you. So I went out there, and like when I walked in, these two big-ass Rockwallers came, and then Suge, he comes out the back. They come running around, sniffing around me and stuff, sits down with his cigar, sits his cigar down and does this. And both the dogs ran and sat down next to him. So I'm like, okay, this one of them meetings. He said, well, what you want?
Kane, on his side, recognized Pac's talent from the very beginning and always stood up for him when critics tried to say Pac wasn't a real lyricist. And then there's the mystery of an unreleased track they recorded together, Wherever You Are, a song that never officially dropped. Anyone still doubting Pac's pen needs to hear that one, because Pac went bar for bar with a living legend like Kane, but there was something deeper tying Big Daddy Kane and Tupac together, their connection to the 5% Nation, also known as the Nation of Gods and Earths. This powerful movement, born in Harlem during the 1960s, preached that Black people are the original people of the world, and that true power comes from knowing yourself. At its core, it's all about knowledge, self-awareness, and empowerment. Kane tapped into it early back in the 80s, and you can hear it all through his rhymes. He laced his bars with concepts like supreme mathematics, and the supreme alphabet. Deep stuff if you know the code, but even if you don't, it still made his verses sound sharper and more powerful.
A 400,000 advance. Why you ain't just simply say 500,000? Man, you Big Daddy Kane, man. I can't see myself signing you for less than $1 million. I gotta give you $1 million because you're already a household name. But then he was like, well, yo, look, I don't know how you doing financially, but if you want, I can just give you 100K in the morning. That's when I knew it was time to go. I was like, you just gonna give me 100,000 with no agreement? Nah, I was like, I'll let you know tomorrow. And then I went and switched my flights like a 6 a.m.
Even on tracks like The Wrath of Kane, you can catch those subtle 5% Nation references woven straight into the flow. Now, when it comes to Tupac, his tie to the 5% Nation was a little different. He was never formally initiated, but he picked up the teachings back in his Baltimore days. Plus, through his mother, Afeni Shakur, a former Black Panther, Pac soaked up revolutionary ideas from an early age. That's why themes of self-knowledge, empowerment, and fighting oppression pour through almost everything he ever touched.
Bottom line is that they got caught up in all the hype. And if Tupac came back from the dead now to hear this interview, he would agree. They got caught up in the hype. And Public Enemy prophesies, don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. And they got caught up. Biggie, they all got caught up, and it's a shame because we ain't supposed to go out like that.
From his interviews to his lyrics, Pac carried that energy everywhere. So even though Kane repped the East and Pac was holding down the West, and the industry tried hard to pit them against each other, they actually shared the same philosophy and worldview. That bond gave them real respect for one another. But here's where it gets wild. Suge Knight wasn't just some label boss. He was a master at spinning narratives. Death Row Records was booming, and Suge knew nothing sold better than drama. The East Coast versus West Coast rivalry was the ultimate marketing weapon, and Suge had no problem engineering it. His move with Kane wasn't random. It was a calculated play when he slid that Death Row East offer across the table. Suge was basically trying to drag a respected East Coast legend into the West Coast narrative. But when Kane refused, it didn't just keep him out of the deal. It turned him into a wild card in the public's eyes.
You being a respected lyricist, how you feel about the people that push the narrative and say that Tupac, he wasn't a lyricist?
Okay, but hold up. Tupac is a lyricist. See what I'm saying? It's just that he's not one of those lyrical MCs that spit stuff, but his stuff is, he spit deep lyrics.
Suddenly, the media painted Kane as the guy refusing to take sides, while everyone else was knee-deep in the hype. And Suge? He had a way of making even neutrality look like a statement. Tupac didn't have that same luxury. The moment he signed with Death Row, he became Suge's crown jewel, the face of the label. That meant the East verses. West feud got stitched right into his image. Magazines, TV, radio, they all fed the fire.
That touch your soul. So I do consider Tupac a lyricist. You know what I'm saying? Even though his stuff is about substance, I do consider him a lyricist. Because it's like this here. You have to be lyrical to touch someone's soul, to make someone feel like, yo, I don't know this man, but he knows my pain. You see what I'm saying? So I do consider Tupac a lyricist.
And while Pac was naturally outspoken and fiery, a lot of that so-called tension with East Coast rappers wasn't organic. It was amplified, and sometimes even straight up manufactured by label agendas. And KRS-One peeped all of this. That's why he refused to play along with the industry's dirty games, and he never stopped calling out how black artists were being exploited. But here's the thing. Suge wasn't the only one pushing that East versus West narrative. The whole record industry in the 90s had its hands in it. Executives, A&Rs, even the media, they all had financial reasons to hype up a rivalry. Album sales, magazine covers, TV ratings, everything spiked when there was conflict. In some cases, rappers were even pressured to throw shots, or their interviews got twisted and edited to look like beef existed when it really didn't.
Mathematics, you know, the 5% thing, you was kind of heavy in that, the knowledge itself. That was really woven into your rhymes when you first took off. When did you get introduced to that? Were you a 5%er or was you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I believe that I was introduced. I want to say 81, 82, somewhere around.
Kane and Tupac were prime examples. Two respected lyricists with deep philosophies, whose real interactions were built on respect, not hostility. But the industry flipped the script to make it seem like the total opposite. Suge and his crew knew fans loved chaos. Conflict kept people buying albums and glued to the drama, and they had no problem stage managing it. But let's be real. This wasn't just Suge or Death Row. East Coast labels like Bad Boy and other execs were playing the same game, pushing the rivalry from their side too. Still, Suge had the loudest presence and the most aggressive tactics, using fear, loyalty, and street credibility to keep his artists under control and keep the narrative alive.
The East Coast-West Coast rivalry, number one. People were starting to say it's an East Coast-West Coast rivalry because it was people that's trying to make money. It was true people trying to make careers. It was people trying to get famous. It was people hustling other people out of money on the East Coast. You don't have no team, you need us. We from the East Coast, pay us X amount of dollars for protection. And some of these idiots was doing it.
And Tupac, with his fiery temper, became the perfect weapon for that strategy. Kane, on the other hand, stayed cautious and refused to play pawn. But even his refusal got twisted by the media into yet another piece of the story. It was never just about beef. While fans and the media obsessed over fake rivalries, the industry was busy running bigger plays, locking artists into contracts, slicing profits from collabs, and pumping out albums. That East versus West feud sold way more than music. It sold hype, influence, and non-stop attention. Suge and the other execs knew that controlling perception could be just as profitable as controlling record sales. And this is why the story of Kane and Tupac matters so much. It's proof that the history we hear about hip-hop isn't always the full truth. Suge and the execs backing that narrative cashed in on chaos, while the artists themselves were the ones stuck in the crossfire. So when you really look back at the 90s, the East Coast versus West Coast war wasn't just some random clash. It was a scripted drama. Suge was one of the main directors pulling the strings from the shadows, while Kane and Tupac didn't play the roles the industry tried to write for them. That's exactly why their true bond barely ever gets mentioned. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think about Kane and Tupac's connection? And do you believe Suge and the industry puppet masters manufactured this whole feud just to cash in? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.